Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ma'am Jill Rose Ador. My name is Jundril R. Pueblos, your student in CA-200, Section F, Institutional-Based Correction. Institutional-Based Correction. Institutional-based correction facilities include prisons and jails. Prisons are state of federal housing facilities that confine convicted felons with sentences typically longer than a year. Jails are administered by law enforcement and hold those with shorter sentences, usually for 1 year or less, and those awaiting trial. Non-institutional correction. The non-institutional methods for treating offenders include probation for youth offenders, suspended sentence and probation of drug offenders, adult probation, and parole or conditional pardon. The probation system in the Philippines has unique features which are adapted of the country's cultural environment. Institutional correction, Philippines prison system. We have the DOJ. And the meaning of DOJ is the Department of Justice. We have the BUCOR, the Bureau of Correction. We have the PPA, Parole and Probation Administration. We have the BPP, Board of Pardon and Parole. DSWD, Department of Social Welfare and Development. CICL, Child in Conflict with the Law. We have the DILG, Department of the Interior and Local Government. We have the BGMP, Bureau of Jail Management and Penology. We have the City Jail. We have also the Municipal Jail and District Jail, Provincial Government. And the last one is Provincial Jail. And we need to discuss first the DOJ, the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is the under of executive department of the Philippines government responsible for upholding the rule of the law in the Philippines. It is the government's principal law agency, serving as its legal counsel and prosecution arm. The Department of Justice enforces federal laws, seeks just punishment for the guilty, and ensures the fair and impartial administration of justice. We have 7 agency operating units located nationwide. Number 1, the New Bilibid Prison in Muntinlupa City. Number 2, we have the Correctional Institution for Women, or CIW, in Mandaluyong City. Number 3, Ihawig Prison and Penal Farm in Puerto Princesa City, Palawan. Number 4, we have Sablan Prison and Penal Farm in Occidental Mindoro. Number 5, we have San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm in Zamboanga City. Number 6, we have Leyte Regional Prison in Abuyog, Leyte. And the last one is we have Davao Prison and Penal Farm in Panabo, Davao Province. Bureau of Correction. The Bureau of Correction, or BUCOR, is an agency of the Department of Justice which is charged with the custody and rehabilitation of national offenders who have been sentenced to 3 years or of imprisonment or more. The agency has its headquarters in the New Bilibid Prisons Reservation in Muntinlupa. Parole and Probation Administration. The Parole Probation Administration, abbreviated as PPA, is an agency of the Philippine government under the Department of Justice responsible for providing a less costly alternative to imprisonment of first-time offenders who are likely to respond to individualized community-based treatment program. We have goals. The administration's program sets to achieve the following goals. Number 1, to promote the reformation of criminal offenders and to reduce the incidence of the recidivism. And the number 2 is provide a cheaper alternative to be the institutional confinement of first-time offenders who are likely to respond to individualized community-based treatment programs. So we have the functions. To carry out these goals, the agency, through its network of regional and field parole and probation offices, performs the following functions. We have the number 1, to administer the parole and probation system. Number 2, to exercise supervision over paroles, pardonists, and probationers. Number 3, to promote the correction and rehabilitation of criminal offenders. Parole. It is a conditional release of a prisoner from correctional institution after serving the minimum period of prison sentence. Parole is the release of prisoner either temporarily for a special purpose or completely before the expiry of a sentence on the promise of good behavior. Such as promise is known as the word honor provided in the parole order. Probation. Probation is a criminal law, is a period of supervision over an offender, ordered by the court often in leo and incarceration. In some jurisdictions, the term probation applies only to community sentences, such as suspended sentences. Probation is a privilege granted by the court to a person convicted of a criminal offense to remain in a community instead of actually going to prison jail. And we have the BPP, or Board of Pardon and Parole. The BPP, or the Board of Pardons and Paroles, releases prisoners on parole and recommends the grant of presidential pardons. The Parole and Probation Administration supervises the rehabilitation of parolees as well as probationers. The Board of Pardons and Parolees decided which eligible offenders to release on parole or discretionarily mandatory supervision and under what conditions. We have the difference between parole and pardon. The parole is that both probation and parole are used as an alternative to jail or prison time. Pardons are given by higher government powers in order to wipe an offender's record clean and free them to any remaining penalties, while pardon is the focus on helping individuals clear the names from their alleged crimes, not just rehabilitate or merge back into society. It is typically granted by higher government powers, including the president or local governor. What are the composition of board and pardon and parole? Section 1. Composition of board as provided by law. In accordance with the provision of Act Number 413 as amended, the Board of Pardons and Parole shall be composed of the Secretary of Justice or his representative who shall serve full time as chairman and 6 members consisting of the administrator of the Parole and Probation Administration as ex officio member, a sociologist, a clergyman, an educator, a person with training and experience in correction work, and a member of Philippine Bar, provided that one of them is a woman. The regular members of the Board of Pardons and Parole shall also serve full time. Section 3. There is hereby created a Board of Pardons and Parole to be composed of the Secretary of Justice, who shall be its chairman, and 4 members to be appointed by the President, with the consent of the Commission on Appointment, who shall hold office for a 6th term of 6 years, provided that one of the members of the board shall be a trained sociologist, on a clergyman and educator, 1 psychiatrist, unless a trained psychiatrist be employed by the board, and the other members shall be persons qualified for such work by training and experience. At least 1 member of the board shall be a woman. What is BGMP, or Bureau of Jail Management and Penology? The Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, also referred to as the Jail Bureau, was created pursuant to Section 60 to 65, Chapter 5, Republic Act Number 6975, and initially consisting of uniformed officers and members of the Jail Management and Penology Service as constituted under the Presidential Decree Number 765, Republic Act 9263 provides that the Bureau shall be headed by a chief who is assisted by 2 deputy chiefs, one for administration and another for operations, and 1 for a chief of directional staff, all of whom are appointed by the President upon the recommendation of the DILG Secretary from the among qualified officers with the rank at least Senior Superintendent in BGMP. The Chief of BGMP carries the rank of Director and serves a tour of duty that must not exceed for 4 years unless extended by the President in times of war and other national emergencies. Officers who have retired or are within 6 months from their compulsory retirement age are not qualified to be appointed as a jail director or designated BGMP chief. BGMP is mandated to direct, supervise, and control the administration of operation of all district, city, and municipal jails nationwide with branch task of safekeeping and development. PDL SOLDA noted the 4-month training includes testing of psychometrics, classroom discussions of rehabilitation and counseling, psychology, immersion in jails and mental health institution, and case conferences. So we have the functions. In line with its mission, the Jail Bureau endeavors to perform the following functions: formulate policies and guidelines in administration of all district, city, and municipal jails nationwide, implement strong security measures for the control of PDL, provide for the basic needs of PDL, conduct activity for the development of PDL, improve jail facilities, and promote the general welfare and development of the person. BGMP Regional Office or BGMPRO. There are 17 BGMP regional offices nationwide with structure patterned with a BGMP national headquarters. The BGMP regional office is headed by the regional director and is supported by a regional command group, regional coordinating staff, and regional management support unit whose function is patterned also with the national headquarters but in smaller scale. The BGMP operates and maintains regional offices in each administrative region of the country, headed by a regional director for jail management and penology with the rank of at least senior superintendent. The regional director is assisted by an assistant regional director of administration, assistant regional director for operations, and regional chief of direction staff, who are all officers with the rank of at least superintendent. The national headquarters is the command and staff office of the BGMP and is composed of the command group, directorates, and management support staff. We have command group. We have the chief BGMP, deputy chief for administration of the jail bureau, deputy chief for operation of the jail bureau, chief of the directorial staff of the jail bureau. We have the provincial jail administrator's office. In every province, the BGMP operates and maintains a provincial jail administrator's office, headed by a provincial administrator to oversee the implementation of jail services of all district, city, and the municipal jails within the territorial jurisdiction. District jail. Within large cities or a group of clustered municipalities, a district jail headed by a district warden may be established. As a district jail is a cluster of small jails, each having a monthly average population of 10 or less inmates, and is located in the vicinity of the court. City and municipal jails. The BGMP operates and maintains city and municipality jails, each headed by a city or municipal warden, as a case may be. City prisoners, one who is sentenced to a prison term of 1 day to 3 years. And number 4, we have the municipal prisoner, one who is sentenced to a prison term of 1 day to 6 months. Major programs. There are 4 major programs under the mandate of BGMP, and they are the following: PDL, custody; security and control program; PDL, Welfare and Development Program, Decongestion Program, Good Governance. Prison Administration. Prison administration fundamentally involves the application of both leadership and management techniques to correctional institutions. It must be noted that prison administration and jail administration are not the same thing. The former addresses concerns in the context of correctional institution charged with maintaining the safety and security of both prisoners and staff within the jurisdictional authority of a state or the federal government, while the latter comprises fundamentally local correctional institutions. Prison administration duties. The administrative division of a prison provides a range of services to support the Department of the Corrections and officers working in a prison. These services can include budgeting, management, overseeing policies and procedure, and conducting audits. The qualification you must have to be eligible for prison administration uh, positions will vary depending on the Department of Correction you're applying to. Jail Administrator Education. To work the Department of Corrections, you'll need at least a high school diploma or GED. In some states, you also need a bachelor degree, such as criminal justice or law enforcement. How much experience you need will vary by state. In 2018, the Philippines held the sixth highest prison population out of 21 Asian countries. As of 2019, the Philippine population listed at least 108.31 million people, and 215,000 of those people were incarcerated. Therefore, the Philippines has an incarceration rate of about 200 per 100,000 citizens. There are 933 prisons running in the Philippines. Unfortunately, they are mismanaged and overcrowded. Below are 5 important facts about the incarceration system in the Philippines. 5 facts about the Philippines incarceration system. We have the severe overcrowding, pre-trial detainees, high death tolls, vigilante justice, and corruption. So let's discuss the 5 Philippine incarceration system. Severe overcrowding. Rodrigo Duterte won the presidential election in 2016. He promised to end crime within 6 months. So we all heard about Mayor Duterte na about his platforms. He promised to end crime within 6 months. This promise also included the killing of tens of thousands of criminals. Duterte's election led to the infamous war on drugs and eventually overcrowded prisons. Manila City Jail, the largest jail in the Philippines, is split into dorms that safely house 170 inmates. Currently, these dorms house around 500 people. Similarly, a room designated for 30 people holds about 130 in Quezon City Jail. This severe overcrowding in the prisons leads to illness and death tolls in thousands. Pre-trial detainees. According to the World Prison Brief, 75.1% of incarcerations within the Philippines incarceration system are pre-trial. In 2018, 141,422 of 188,270 prisoners were pre-trial detainees. Unfortunately, many people are serving sentences without conviction. Pre-trial detention is found in judicial system all over the world. In countries like Philippines, people may serve time the outweighs their crimes. On average, the prisoner in the Philippines are detained for 9 months without being sentenced. So, high death tolls. About 5,200 inmates die annually at the New Bilibid Prison, or NBP. According to Ernesto Tamayo, the hospital medical chief, These deaths are due to overcrowding, dirty living conditions, and inmate violence. At a 2019 Philippine Senate hearing, Tamayo said that there were uncontrollable outbreaks of pulmonary tuberculosis, in addition to overcrowding, poor living and condition, and inmate violence. NBP lacks nutritional food and basic health care on account of these living conditions. Tamay reports that at least one prisoner dies an NBP each day. Thankfully, politicians and prison employees are working to reduce overcrowding in the Philippines. Human rights advocates have also called for the release of vulnerable inmates, hoping to protect them from poor living conditions. Vigilante justice. Duterte's war on drugs escalated during his presidency. Jobless citizens were recruited to kill anyone suspected of dealing, buying, or using drugs. So we all know, guys, that we have many vigilante uh, when 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 Tatay Digong became a president of the Republic of the Philippines. This one This was one of the few ways for some people to make money. Many homeless and other various people joined the vigilante teams. In 2016, Duterte told the public, if you know of any addicts, go ahead and kill them. Together, the Philippines police force and unidentified gunmen have killed 7,000 known drug dealers and users since Duterte's presidency in 2016. The Philippine war on drugs has created the belief that extrajudicial violence and murder are necessary to fight crime. But the Human Rights Watch has torn the narrative around on Duterte. They are publicizing information about the vigilante justice in the Philippines. Corruption. In August 2018, the public learned a former mayor may have been released from prison for good behavior. He was originally charged for rape and homicide in 1993. Similar stories of corruptions in the Philippines. Prisons continue to emerge. In September 2018, the public learned that a woman was told her husband's sentence would be shortened if she paid 50,000 pesos or $970. Later that year, senators stated that inmates could live like kings for a fee. This information led to further allegations. Prison workers and officials were taking bribes to bring and distribute contraband to inmates. The contraband in question included cigarettes, cell phones, and televisions. Prisons from modernity. Antiquity to modernity, I'm so sorry. Modern civilization in 3rd millennia BC, almost every major ancient civilization used concept of prisons as a mean to detain and remove personal freedoms and incarcerated people. In those early periods of history, prisons were often used as a temporary stopgap before sentencing to death or life of slavery. But as time went on, our civilization developed, prisons started morphing into correctional facilities that started implementing the concept of rehabilitation and reform the prisoners. In addition of upholding convicted or suspected criminals, prisons were often used for holding political prisoners, enemies of the state, and prisoners of war. The earliest records of prisons come from the 1st millennia BC, located on the areas of mighty ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. During those times, prisons were almost always stationed in the underground dungeons where guilty or suspected criminals spent their life either awaiting death, sentence, or recommended to become slaves, often working as galley slaves. Exception from the rule comes from the home of modern democracy, Greece. Their prisoners were held into the poorly isolated buildings where they could often be visited by their friends and family. Primary source of their tension were not dungeons, high walls or bars, but simple wooden blocks that were attached to their feet. Ancient Roman Empire, however, continued to use harsher, harsher methods. Their prisons were built almost exclusively underground, with tight and claustrophobic passageways and cells. Prisoners themselves were held either in simple cells or chained to the walls, for life or for time. As slavery was accepted norm in those days, majority of prisoners that were not sentenced to death were sold as slaves or used by the Roman government as a workforce. One of the most famous uses for the slaves in Roman Imperial was gladiators. So we all know guys what is gladiators. In addition to fighting in the arena, sometimes after a lifetime of training in the special gladiator training houses or ludices, many slaves were tasked as a support workforce that enabled smoother run of the popular gladiator business. The most famous gladiator battleground, the mighty Colosseum Arena in Rome, had a slave army of 224 slaves that worked daily as a power source of the complicated network of 24 elevators that supported gladiators and their wild animal opponents from the underground dungeons to the arena floor. So guys, movie title Spartans and also uh, Hercules. So we see there about gladiators, about their battlegrounds, about their training grounds, about their training camps, Colosseum Arena, or many more. The conditions in the European prisons remained harsh until English royalty started being more involved with their justice system. Henry II commissioned the construction first prison in 1166, together with the first draft of English legal system that used concept of jury. One of the most historic prison legislation was introduced in 1215 or 12,015 when King John signed Magna Carta, which stated that no man could be imprisoned without trial. With the rise of the industry between 16th and 18th century, English prisons became overcrowded. A new penal measures started being implemented, military pardon and penal transportation during the end of 18th century. Over 50,000 prisoners were transported from England to penal colonies in North America and Australia. France even continued their practice of penal colonies until the middle of 20th century, most notably in French Guiana and its infamous prison Devil's Island. And Russia also used remote penal colonies in the frozen northeast Siberia. So this is the prison in Russia, we have America, Australia, Devil's Island, or frozen northeast Siberia. So as you can see guys, it's so crowded. Why is prison good for society? Prison is an important and integral part of the criminal justice system in every country. Used appropriately, it plays a crucial role in upholding the rule of law by helping to ensuring the alleged offenders are brought to justice and by providing a sanction for serious wrongdoing. Then, advantage of prison. Number one, protect society from dangerous and violent criminals. So we'll know that number one is to protect society from dangerous and violent criminals. Number two, isolates those who deserve such as punishment for their family and friends or retribution. Number three, stops offenders from offending as they are locked away. Number four, acts as a deterrent. Number 5, ensures that the law is respected and upheld. Vindication. Number 6, gives offender the chance to reflect on their actions and gives them time to reform their behavior. The disadvantage of prison. Number 1, is expensive. Number 2, schools of crime. Prisoners educated each other in criminal matters. Prison often breed resentment and determination to get back at society. Number 4, most prisoners reoffend and release, so it doesn't bring about reform. Number 5, prison records make it difficult to get a job on release, which can lead back into crime. Number 6, offenders' families suffer through no fault of their own. Number 7, relationships often break down while a prison is in prison. Does prison make us safer? Ask whether it makes sense to maintain such a large and costly prison system. The contributors expand the scope of previous analysis to include a number of underexplored dimensions, such as the fiscal impact of states, effects on dimensions, children employment prospects for former inmates. Stephen Raphael and Michael Stool assess the reason behind the explosion in incarceration rates and find that criminal behavior itself accounts for only a small fraction of the prison boom. 85% of the trend can be attributed to get tough on crime. Policies that have increased both the likelihood of a prison sentence and length of the time served. Sean Bushway shows that while prison time effectively deters and capacitates criminals in the short term, long-term benefits such as overall crime reduction or individual rehabilitation are less clear-cut. Amy Lerman conducts a novel investigation into the effects of imprisonment on criminal psychology and uncovers striking evidence that placement in a highly security penitentiary leads to increased rates of violence and anger, particularly in the case of first time of minor offenders. Rucker Johnson documents the spillover effects on parental incarceration. Children who have had a parent serve prison time exhibit more behavior problems than their peers. Policies to enhance the well-being of these children are essential to breaking a devastating cycle of poverty, unemployment, and crime. John Duhonio's economic calculations suggest that alternative social welfare policies such as education and employment programs for at-risk youth may lower crime just as effectively as prisons, but at a much lower human cost. The cost of hiring a new teacher is roughly equal to the cost of incarcerating an additional inmate. The United States currently imprisons a greater proportion of its citizens than any other nation in the world until now. However, we've lacked systematic and comprehensive data on how this prison boom has affected families, communities, and our nation as a whole. Do prisons make us safer? Provides a highly nuanced and deeply engaging accounts of one of the most dramatic policy development in recent U.S. history. Does the prison system in the Philippines effective? The study found that sentencing someone to prison had no effect on their chances of being convicted of a violent crime within 5 years of being released from prison. This means that prison has no preventative effect on violence in the long term among people who might have been sentenced to probation. It also found a preventative incapacitation effect in the short term. During the time when prisoners were still in prison, but this effect is smaller than we typically assume. Preventing one person who has previously convicted of a violent crime from committing a new violent crime within 5 years of their sentence requires imprisoning 16 such individuals. These findings are important for two reasons. First, imprisoning just one person costs tens of thousands of dollars per year. The short-term and small preventative effect of prisons mean that those dollars could be better spent on other violence prevention or public safety strategies. Second, the high costs of prisons combined with concerns about the negative collateral consequences for prisoners, their families, and communities have prompted renewed efforts in states around the country to reduce imprisonment. Yet, despite the of fact that over half of prison inmates were convicted of a violent crime, most criminal justice reforms exclude those with violent pasts. The results from this study mean that many people convicted of crimes like robbery and assault could be sentenced to probation rather than prison with little impact of public safety. Yet, there are also good reasons to believe that prison might actually increase crime. The harsh prison environment could exacerbate mental health problems, make people prone to aggression, or make them cynical and distrustful of the legal system. Prisons could isolate prisoners from friends and family who might help them find jobs eventually, or prisoners may learn from the prisons how to better criminals. To examine how prison affects violent crime, our study compared people sentenced to prison to those sentenced probation supervision in the community. Using data in all the individuals sentenced for a felony in Michigan between 2003 and 2006. They were followed through 2015 to track conviction for violent crimes. The study focused on the people who had committed a violent crime and were eligible for both prison or probation sentences. Such people were typically convicted of crimes like robbery or assault. Individuals convicted of more serious violent crimes like rape or murder are generally not eligible for probation. Determining whether differences in future violent offending as are a result of prison itself is challenging. However, those who are sentenced to prison are probably more likely than those sentenced to probation to commit a violent crime in the future, even if they had been sentenced to prison. To overcome this challenge, the study used the random assignment of criminal defendants to judges to mimic a randomized experiment. Different judges are more harsh or lenient in their sentencing. Even within the same country courthouse, the study compared defendants randomly assigned to harsher judges to those who were randomly assigned to more lenient judges. Prisons have four major purposes. They are the retribution, incapacitation, deterrence, and the last one is rehabilitation. Retribution. The definition of retribution in the dictionary is an act of punishing or taking vengeance for wrongdoing, sin, or injury. Other definition of retribution is punishment of vengeance. Retribution is defined as something done to get back at someone or the act of punishing someone for their actions. An example of retribution is when someone gets the death penalty for committing murder. So that retribution, guys, is for example, like that penalty or kind like committing murder or you kill someone, homicide, murder. Number two, incapacitation. Incapacitation in the context of criminal sentencing philosophy is one of the functions of punishment. It involves capital punishment, sending an offender to prison, or possibly restricting their freedom into community to protect society and prevent the person from committing further crimes. Incapacitation, deterrence. The crime prevention effects of the threat of punishment as a theory of choice in each individual's balance the benefits and costs of crime. First, by increasing the certainty of punishment, potential offenders may be deterred by the risk of apprehension. For example, if there is an increase in the number of state troopers patrolling highways on a holiday weekend, some drivers may reduce their speed in order to avoid receiving a ticket. Rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is defined as a set of interventions designed to optimize functioning and reduce disability in individuals with health conditions in interactions with their environment. Rehabilitation is the process of helping an individual achieve the highest level of function, independence, and quality of possible. Rehabilitation does not reverse or undo the damage caused by disease or trauma, but rather helps restore the individual to optimal health, health, functioning, and well-being. What was the goals of prison reform? Prison reform is the attempt to improve condition inside prisons, improve the effectiveness of penal system, or implement alternatives to incarceration. It also focuses on ensuring the reinstatement of those whose lives are impacted by crimes. In modern times, the idea of making living spaces safe and clean has spread from the civilian population to include prisons. On ethical grounds which honor the unsafe and unsanitary prison val- valuate constitutional law, prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. In recent times, prison reform ideas include greater access to legal counsel and family, conjugal visits, proactive security against violence, and implementing house arrest with assistive technology. What's the difference between prison and jail? The key difference of prison and jail. Jail are intended for short sentences and temporary confinement, while prisons are for felony sentencing longer than a year. While jail is the first group consists of people who have been convicted of relatively minor crimes such as misdemeanors or violating their probation. The second group is innocent people. A large por- a large I'm so sorry, a large portion of the people held in jails are in the pre-trial stage and have either been denied bail or been unable to pay, depending on the severity of their charge. These people may have no previous conviction. Jail are generally operated by country governments under the country sheriff's jurisdiction. They serve smaller population than prisons and are designed for shorter stays. Arizona has a multitude of jails, at least one in each country. There are also smaller holding facilities that are still considered jails, operating by municipal governments. These facilities used to uphold people for a few hours or days before they are transferred to a larger jail. Since the 1980s, the proportion of jail population made up of pretrial detainees has increased. The proportion used to be around 50% but has increased to about 75%. You can learn more about these statistics here. Prison. Prison are reserved for those convicted of felonies. It is possible to receive a jail sentence for more minor felonies, but a prison sentence is standard. Prisons tend to be much larger than jails and are operated at the state or federal level. Some prisons are privately owned. Arizona has 16 prisons. 6 are privately owned prison, while not pleasant places, offer more services to get to their population. To their population. They provide a variety of education, including GED, JED courses. The problem with jails, because they designed for shorter stays, jails tend to have far fewer services than a standard prison. Inmates staying in jails have complained of inadequate medical care, lack of nutritional food, and inappropriate limitation on movement, like lack of access to exercise. Inmates with a criminal history or the individuals who expect to be convicted may be driven to accept a plea in order to transition from jail prison. This motivation leave jail as quickly as possible can mean they accept a plea that is less than favorable to inmate, as we discuss later about the lack of nutritional food, and also for the inappropriate limitations on movement, lack of access to exercise. There is another glaring problem with jails and their conditions. They detain innocent people. While it may be necessary in certain circumstances to detain someone before their conviction, the presumption of innocence means that they cannot be punished until their guilt has been proven. The poor conditions of jail serve as de facto punishment. This is one of the reasons having an attorney present at a bond hearing can make such significant difference. It can be the difference between being free before trial and having to remain in jail for months. If you are in need to criminal defense representation, check out our website at duranjustice.com and reach out to us at 602.675.4508 to schedule a free consultation with one of the criminal defense attorneys. How Roman Catholic influence prison in the Philippines? Influence and practice of religion in the correctional setting is as old as the history of prisons. Initial entry of religion into prison was probably carried out by religious men who themselves were in prison. The Bible stories of such prisoners include Joseph and Jeremiah in the Old Testament, and John the Baptist, Peter, John, and the Paul in the New Testament. Beginning in the days of Constantine, the early Christian church granted asylum to criminals who would otherwise have been mutilated or killed. Although this custom was restricted in most countries by 15th century, releasing prisoners during Easter time and request by church authorities to pardon or reduce sentences for offenders remained for centuries, with the latter still in existence in a modified form. Imprisonment under church jurisdiction became a substitute for corporal capital punishment. In medieval times, the Roman Catholic Church developed penal techniques later used by secular states, such as the monastic cell, that serve as a punishment place for criminal offenders. In 1593, the Protestants of Amsterdam built a house of correction for women and one for men in 1603. In Rome, what are now the Sisters of the Good Shepherd built correctional facilities for women. And in 1703, Pope Clement built the famous Michael Prison as a house of correction for younger offenders with separation, silence, work, and prayer emphasized. As late as the 18th century, the Vatican prison still served as a model prison designed for Europe and America. Early settlers of North America brought with them the customs and common laws of England, including the pillory, the stacks, and whipping post. During the 18th century, isolating offenders from fellow prisoners became the accepted correctional practice. Early settlers of North America brought with them the customs and common laws of England, including the pillory. the stacks, and the whipping post. During the 18th century, isolating offenders from fellow prisoners became the accepted correctional practice. It was thought that long-term isolation combined with in-depth discussion with clergy would lead inmates to repent or become penitent, sorry for their sins. Thus, the term penitentiary was derived. West Jersey and Pennsylvania Quakers were primarily responsible for many of the prison reforms. They developed the idea of substituting imprisonment for corporal punishment and combining the idea of prison with workhouse. The prototype of this regime was the Walnut Street Jail in Philadelphia. Next slides, guys. As we proceed, we can see the street jail in Philadelphia. And next slide. That in style reflected the Quakers' belief in man's ability to reform through reflection and remorse. Even during the 19th century, when daytime work was initiated by airborne system, solitary confinement at night was still the norm in correctional practice. The forced solitary confinement was thought to serve the same repentant purpose as older penitentiary. Belief in education as a tool for reducing criminal activity also assisted in the growth of religion in prison. Because of the limited budgets of correctional institutions, chaplains were often called upon to be the sole educators in many American prisons. The schooling often consisted of the chaplain standing in a dark corridor with a lantern hanging from the cell bars while extolling the virtues of repentance. Volunteers also have a long history in corrections that can be traced back to beginning of prisons. In the last 200 years, many religious groups have entered correctional facilities to provide religious services to inmates. One of the most famous advocates for volunteers in corrections was Maud Ballington Booth, the daughter-in-law of William Booth, who founded the Salvation Army. Today, volunteers are vital to religious programs, and without the inmate participation would surely be limited. Faith representatives would be unable to minister to the large number of variety of inmates. Many older correctional institutions are being refurbished or destroyed, replaced with facilities designed for better observation and security. Yet the initial influence of religions on the philosophy and the design of the penitentiary will surely remain in correctional history. So guys, as what I've said earlier, this is the picture of Walnut Street Jail in Philadelphia. Walnut Street Jail in Philadelphia. Walnut Street Prison was a city jail and penitentiary house in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from 1773 to 1838. Legislation calling for establishment of a jail was passed in 1773 to relieve overcrowding in the High Street Jail. The first prisoners were admitted in 1976. It was located at 6th and Walnut Streets, where it acquired its original name, Walnut Street Jail. The penitentiary house, built in 1790, is considered to be the first in the United States, as it was built to use individual cells and work details. The word penitentiary came from the Pennsylvania Quakers' belief in penitence and self-examination as means to salvation. This was made a new and permanent form of combating crime through the practice of solitary confinement, which was later adopted as the Eastern State Penitentiary. The Walnut Street Jail Goal was built 1773 to 76 from designs of Robert Smith and demolished about 1835. The prison's lot has abounded with Walnut Street, 6 and Prawn Street, now Locust. With the main building fronting of Walnut Street, William Penn, who did not favor capital punishment, established the most humane penal code in the colonies. Only murder and treason were punishable by death, and imprisonment at hard labor was a standard punishment for the other serious crimes. As Philadelphia grew and crimes increased, the penal code became more severe. Overcrowded jails with deplorable living and working conditions made the need for reform evident. In 1787, the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisons were organized. The society's perseverance was responsible for the adoption of new laws, which made significant changes in the administration and treatment of inmates. Those, those convicted of serious offenses to be subjected to unremitting solitude at hard labor for a period to be fixed by the court. It was hoped the solitary confinement would ultimately result in repentance and spiritual regeneration. The Walnut Street was called the first penitentiary in the world, the reference being principally to a small building in the rear which was built in 1791 to house prisoners whose sentence included solitarily confinement during the 1790s. The jail and the Pennsylvania system of solitary confinement great admired throughout the world. By 18,000, however, mounting disciplinary problems caused by overcrowded facilities brought an end to the jail's finest years. The two-story wooden structure, or 3GL, was a former blacksmith shop that was purchased by Reverend Richard Allen, who had it rolled overground and placed on a lot he owned at the northeast corner of 6th and Lombard Streets. In 1794, the building became the first home of the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church founded by Reverend Allen. The land is the oldest in the country continuously owned by African Americans. Today, the church is known as the Mother Bethel African American Methodist Episcopal Church, and its present building was constructed in 1890 on an adjacent lot. King Henry. The English Reformation started in the reign of Henry. The English Reformation was to have reaching consequences in Tudor England. Henry decided to rid himself of his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, after she had failed to produce a male heir to the throne. We had already decided who his next wife would be, Anne Boleyn, by 1527. Catherine was considered too old to have any more children. However, a divorce was not a simple issue. In fact, it was a very complicated one. Henry was a Roman Catholic, and the head of this church was the Pope based in Rome. The Roman Catholic faith believed in marriage for life. It did not recognize, let anyone support. Divorce, those were widowed with free to remarry. This was an entirely different issue. But husbands could not simply decide that their marriage was not working. Divorce was wife and remarry. The Roman Catholic Church simply did not allow it. This put Henry in a difficult position. If he went ahead and announced that as a king of England, he was allowing himself a divorce, the Pope could excommunicate him. This meant that under Catholic Church law, your soul could never get to heaven. To someone living at the time of Henry, this was a very real fear and a threat which the Catholic Church used to keep people under its control. Another approach Henry used to make a special appeal to the Pope so that might to get special. Papal dispensation. This meant that the Pope would agree to Henry's request for a divorce purely because Henry was King of England, but that it would not be effect at the way Catholic Church banned divorce for others. The Pope refused to grant Henry this, and 1953's anger was such he ordered the Archbishop of Canterbury to grant him a divorce so that he could marry Anne Boleyn. Edward the Sixth, Edward the Sixth, 12 October 1537, July 6, 1553 was King of England and Ireland from 28 January 1547 until his death in 1553. He was crowned on February 20, 1547 at the age of 9. Edward was the son of Henry and Jane Seymour and the first English monarch to be raised as a Protestant. During his reign, the realm was governed by a regency council because he never reached maturity. The council was first led by his uncle Edward Seymour, first Duke to Somerset on 1547 to 1549, and then by John Dudley, first Earl of Warwick, to 1550 to 1553, who from 1551 was Duke of Northumberland. Edward's reign was marked by economic problems and social unrest that in 1549 erupted into riot and rebellion. An expensive war with Scotland, and the first successful, ended with military withdrawal from Scotland, Boulogne, Shoremere in exchange for peace. Thus, transformation of the Church of England into a recognizably Protestant body also occurred under Edward, who took the great interest in religious matters. His father Henry had severed the link between the Church and Rome, but had never permitted the reconciliation of Catholic doctrine or ceremony. It was during Edward's reign that Protestantism was established for the first time in England with reforms that include the abolition of clerical celibacy and the Mass, and the imposition of compulsory services in English. In February 1553, at age 15, Edward fell ill. With his sickness was discovered to be terminal. He and his council drew up a device for the succession. To prevent the country return to Catholicism, Edward named his first cousin was once removed by Lady Jane Grey, and his heir, excluding his half-sister, Mary and Elizabeth. This decision was disputed following Edward's death, and Jane was deposed by Mary 9 days after becoming queen. Mary, a Catholic, reverses Edward's Protestant reforms during her reign, but Elizabeth restored in 1559. In matter of religion, the regime of Northumberland followed the same policy as that of Somerset, supporting an increasingly vigorous program of reform. Although Edward's practical influence on government was limited, his intense Protestantism made a reforming administration obligatory. His succession was managed by the reforming faction who continued in power throughout his reign. The man Edward trusted most, Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop and Canterbury, introduced a series of religious reforms that revolutionized the English Church from one that, while rejecting papal supremacy, remained essentially Catholic to one that was institutionally Protestant. The confiscation of church property that had begun under Henry resumed under Henry, notably with the dissolution of the chantries to the great monetary advantage of the crown and the new owners of the seized property. Church reform was therefore as much political as a religious policy under Edward. under Edward. By the end of reign, the church had been financially ruined, with much of the property of the bishops transferred into lay hands. The religious convictions of both Somerset and Northumberland have proved elusive for historians who are divided into sincerity of their Protestantism. There is less doubt, however, about the religious fervor of King Edward, who was said to have read 12 chapters of scripture daily and enjoyed sermons, and was commemorated by John Fox as a goodly imp. Edward was depicted during his life afterwards as a new Hosea or Josiah, the biblical king who destroyed the idols of Baal. The English Reformation advanced under the pressure from the two directions, from the traditionalists on the one hand and the zealots on the other, who led incidents of iconoclasm, image smashing, and complained that reform did not go far enough. Cranmer set himself the task of writing a uniform liturgy in English, tailing all weekly and daily services and religious festivals to be made compulsory in the first act of uniformity of 1949. The Book of Common Prayer of 1549, intended as a compromise, was attacked by traditionalists for dispensing with many cherished rituals of liturgy, such as the elevation of the bread and wine, while some reformers complained about the retention of too many popish elements, including vintages of sacrificial rites at the communion. After 1551, the Reformation advanced further with approval and encouragement of Edward, who began to exert more personal influence in his role as a supreme head of the church. The new changes were also a response to criticism from such reformers as John Hopper, Bishop of Gloucester, and Scott John Knox was employed as a minister in Newcastle upon Tyne under the Duke of Northumberland, and whose preaching at court prompted the king to oppose kneeling at communion. Cranmer was also influenced by the views of continental reformer Martin Bucer, who died in England in 1551 by Peter Martyr, was teaching at Oxford, and by other foreign theologians. The progress of Reformation was further speeded by the consecration of more reformers as bishops. Types of crime. Crime is a behavior, either by act omission, defined by statutory or command law as deserving punishment, although most crimes require the element of intent. Certain minor crimes may be committed on the basis of strict liability, even if defendant had no specific mindset with regard to the criminal action. For instance, parking violations are crimes that usually do not require prosecutors to establish intent. Some crimes are considered mala prohibita, bad because prohibited. These are prohibited by statute but are not inherently evil. Other crimes are considered mala in se, bad in themselves. They are considered inherently evil under general community standards. The idea of mala in se formed the original judice, justification for common law crimes. However, many crimes that are today prohibited by statute also belong to the category of mala in se. Crimes against the person. The term crimes against a person refers to a broad array of criminal offenses which usually involve bodily harm, the threat of bodily harm, or other actions committed against the will of individual. Those involving bodily harm on threat thereof includes assault, battery, and domestic violence. Additionally, offenses such as harassment, kidnapping, and stalking also are considered crimes against the person. This section contains several articles covering the basics of such crimes, including definitions and sentencing guidelines. See the assault, battery, and intentional torch subsection, and find loss, accidents, and injuries section to learn and more about how to file a civil lawsuit for assault and or battery. Crimes against the property. Crimes against the property is a category of crime that includes burglary, motor vehicle theft, arson, vandalism, and shoplifting. It involves the taking of property or money and does not include a threat of force or use of force against a victim. Generally, thefts where the loss amounts to $1,000 or more are considered felonies, whereas losses of less than $1,000 are considered misdemeanors. Investigators followed up cases based on priority and severity. Members of this division are responsible for investigating felony criminal damage to property, burglary, felony theft, identity theft, computer-related crimes, and auto theft. Crimes against the morality. While we agree that all crimes have a general moral basis, condemned as wrong or bad and proscribed by society, there is a specific group of offenses in modern democratic nation labeled crimes against morality. Included with this group are offenses related to prostitution, pornography, and homosexuality. What do these crimes have in common? Most clearly, they tend to have a sexual basis and are often argued to do sexual harm in both and or psychological sense, as well as physically physically. Conversely, they are often argued to be victimless crimes, especially when the acts occur between consisting adults. Finally, they are considered essentially private acts, but they often occur and are regulated in a public domain. Most importantly, each of these crimes against morality has only relatively in the past 150 years become identified and regulated by state as a crime offense. So everyone, this is my last slide, my 100 slide, the last part of my report. Types or organized crime. Gang criminality. It is the gang who operates on a large scale. Racketeering is a type of organized crime in which the perpetrator set up a coercive, fraudulent, extortionary, or otherwise illegal coordinate scheme or operation, a racket, to repeatedly or consistently collect a profit. Syndicate crime. This is the most significant area of organized crime and consists of the supply of illegal goods and services like smuggling, bottling, gambling, prostitution, and foreign exchange violation are examples of such crimes. There are frontmen at various levels executing the work assigned to them. That's all, Ma'am Jill Rose Ador, and thank you.